When I was 16, my father broke his spine at a construction site. The surgery would cost $200,000. But after scouring the house, we only scraped together $3,800. Clutching my withdrawal application, I reached the school gates when Somerville stopped me, who's the quietest top student in our class. Sitting right behind me that day, she pressed a bank card in my hand. Get your dad treated first. I'll cover the cost. Don't even think about dropping out. I told her I couldn't repay such a sum. She simply said, I'm not asking you to repay it, just get into college later. She sent me living expenses every month with a note that only read, don't give up. My father survived, and I got into a top university. He never once mentioned the money. 10 years later, I owned 3 companies with $1 billion in assets, and Somerville's name appeared on a court's defaulters list. Former shareholder of a tech company, due to joint liability on a guarantee, owes $4.2 million, listed as a defaulted debtor. I put down my phone and pulled the bank card, long since filled with money, from my drawer. This time it was my turn to knock on her door. What's with all the banging? Are you trying to kill me? The rusty security door was yanked open, its hinges shrieking. It wasn't Somerville, but a bald man, bare-chested with a thick gold chain reeking of cheap tobacco. I stood outside, my gaze sweeping past his shoulder. The living room was a mess. Beer bottles littered the floor. The sofa cover was ripped to shreds, and pay up was spray-painted in red on the wall. What are you looking at? Who are you looking for? The bald man flicked his cigarette. Somerville. I said, who are you? He looked me up and down, his eyes lighting up as they stopped on my protection. For a relative of the debtor. Perfect. She owes our boss $1.2 million. You here to pay it? I ignored him and glanced at Casey behind me. Casey, my assistant for 5 years, stepped forward, pushed the bald man aside, and strode in. Hey, you damn. The bald man started to curse, but Casey twisted his wrist and pressed him down. He dropped to his knees on the broken glass, gasping. I stepped over the trash and walked to the bedroom door. It was empty. The closet doors hung open. Not even a hanger left inside. The bed frame covered in dust. He had moved out at least a week ago. Where's she? I turned back to the bald man. How would I know? He gritted his teeth. The court already seized this apartment. Our boss forcibly pried it open last week to use as a temporary dormitory. She ran faster than a rabbit. I didn't speak. A suffocating ache filled my chest. $4.2 million. To me, it was just half a month's profit from 2 of my company's production lines. But for an ordinary person, it was an insurmountable weight. Memory flashed in my mind. That winter, my sophomore year of high school, Pittsburgh had its first snowfall. I couldn't afford dorm fees and was kicked out by the supervisor, sneaking into the utility room under the stadium bleachers. That night, I had a high fever and my body freezing. The iron door was pushed open. Wind and snow poured in, and Somerville stood there. She wore an oversized school uniform, her nose red, holding a glass bottle wrapped in a towel. She didn't ask questions or offer pity. She just pressed the scalding hot bottle into my arms. She took out 2 packets of fever reducers and 2 steaming hot savory pastries from her pocket. Eat it all, she said, turning back into the snow. I held that glass bottle all night. It saved my miserable life. I always remembered that warmth. Mr. Frank, Casey said, releasing the bald man. Just had someone check the street cameras. Miss Somerville. She went to the South District. The South District, notorious lawless district, a gathering place for slums and homeless encampments. I shoved my hands into my pockets, my fingertips brushing the worn bank card. Let's go. Where? Casey asked. I gave the shivering man on the floor a cold glance. South District. Turn the place upside down. Find her. By the time the car drove into the South District, it was completely dark. Half the street lights were out, the air thick with cheap takeout and backed up sewers. A Maybach stopping here was like wearing a tuxedo into a pigsty, but I didn't care. Casey pointed to a greasy fast food joint ahead. It's signed too grimy to read, Mr. Frank. The informant says Miss Somerville has been washing dishes here for the past few days. $60 a day, meals included. $60 a day. I closed my eyes. I pushed open the door and walked straight toward the place. Before I even entered, a sharp scream cut through the air. Are you blind? This is my brand new limited edition dress. Through the greasy glass, I saw Somerville. She wore an ill-fitting gray waterproof apron, her hair tied back with an elastic band, her face pale as paper, her jawline sharp from weight loss. She was squatting on the floor holding a rag. On the ground was a spilled puddle of mushroom soup, and standing in front of her was a flashily dressed woman, Ulysses, Somerville's college roommate, an employee she had personally mentored and promoted. Ulysses, don't get so angry. She didn't do it on purpose. A man sat nearby, slick back hair, wearing a poorly tailored custom suit. Wilson, Somerville's ex-fiancé. Wilson, I just can't stand it. Ulysses leaned into his arms, pounding. I'm usually not one for drama, but today is our company's IPO anniversary, and she, a dishwasher, spilled soup on my leg. Isn't she doing this on purpose to annoy me? She emphasized the word dishwasher. Wilson patted her hand, looking down at Somerville. Somerville, it's not like I haven't told you. He sighed with sickening condescension. Who insisted on shouldering that debt back then? Why put yourself in this situation? Look at you now. You don't look like a top university graduate anymore. Somerville didn't look up, meticulously wiping the soup. Her movements were mechanical, numb. I watched her slender back, another memory unbiddenly flashing in my mind. During the second semester of my senior year, $500 in class funds went missing. I was the poorest kid, and everyone pointed fingers, accusing me of theft. The teacher called me into the office and told me to empty my pockets. I clenched my fists, refusing, just as everyone was convinced I was a thief. Somerville pushed open the door. She snapped a physics competition registration form onto the teacher's desk. He didn't steal it, she said, pointing to the timestamp from noon to 1 p.m. He was helping the physics teacher organize lab equipment. Security footage confirms it. She turned to face the class, her voice clear. Being poor doesn't make you a thief. If you don't have proof, shut up. After school that day, she called out to me by the sports field. No comfort, no sympathy. She just looked into my eyes and said one sentence, Frank, never bow your head. But now the girl who told me never bow your head was squatting on a greasy floor, bowing her head in front of a disgusting man. Where's the owner? Call your owner out. Ulysses screamed. The owner rushed out, sweating and bowing profusely. How dare you hire such an untrustworthy dishwasher? Fire her, or I'll make sure you get reported every single day. The owner looked at Somerville. Miss Somerville, you see, how about you take your pay and leave today? Somerville stood up, untying her waterproof apron. She offered no excuses. All right, voice hoarse, Casey whispered behind me. Mr. Frank, should I go in and clear the place? Go investigate, I said, staring at the couple, my eyes colder than the night wind. Find out exactly how Wilson got her shoulder that $4.2 million debt. Somerville left through the back door. I didn't follow immediately. I needed to understand who had pushed her over the edge. By the next morning, a thick stack of documents lay on my desk. I opened the first page, my knuckles turning white. What a dirty trick. 3 years ago, Somerville and Wilson partnered to start a tech company. Somerville handled core technology R&D, while Wilson managed external relations and finance. A year ago, Wilson claimed he'd landed a big project that required a loan, presenting a joint liability agreement for Somerville to sign. Or his exact words. I asked. Casey recounted the recorded conversation. He said, Somerville, I'm your fiancé. Would I ever screw you over? This project is a surefire profit once we clear this hurdle. We'll get married. And the result? As soon as the money was deposited, Wilson transferred the funds to a shell company under various pretexts. The legal representative of that shell company is Ulysses. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. Ulysses was using Somerville's hard-earned money to play the socialite in front of her. The company's funding dried up, and Wilson immediately filed for bankruptcy. Liquidation, Casey continued. Because Miss Somerville signed an unlimited joint liability agreement, all the debt fell onto her shoulders for $0.2 million. Wilson walked away clean, re-emerging as a senior partner in Ulysses' company, while Somerville became a defaulter. There's one more thing, Mr. Frank. Casey hesitated. Miss Somerville's mother was diagnosed with end-stage kidney failure last month. He's currently at Third Hospital. This afternoon, if the $20,000 for dialysis isn't paid, the hospital will stop her medication. $20,000 again. It was $20,000. Time formed an absurd, closed loop. My freshman year of college, my father's follow-up rehabilitation treatments reached an ultimatum. I was $18,000 short, even considering selling my blood. Then a $20,000 transfer hit my account. The sender left no name, only don't give up in the memo. I knew it was her. That month, I secretly returned to Pittsburgh. Once from a distance, I saw Somerville eating plain noodles in the cafeteria for a whole month, so I wouldn't go hungry. I leaned back in my leather chair, my heart ripping apart. 10 years later, to pay for her mother's dialysis, she washed dishes in grime and was treated like dirt. You're such a damn failure. 10 years. I'd had countless opportunities to come back and find her, but I was afraid I wasn't successful enough to stand before her. I waited until I achieved success, but she had fallen into hell. Get the car ready. I stood up, grabbing the car keys and the old bank card to Third Hospital. The hospital corridor in the afternoon reeked of disinfectant. As soon as I stepped out of the elevator, I heard an extremely harsh laugh. Following the sound, I saw Somerville leaning against the wall next to the hospital building department, clutching a payment slip. Wilson and Ulysses stood opposite her. Somerville, why do you have to be so stubborn? Wilson, hands in his pockets, feigned deep regret. Her mother's illness can't wait. All you have to do is sign that declaration to fully relinquish your shares. That I was the primary developer of all those technical patents. He pulled a stack of cash, probably $10,000 from his pocket. I'll consider this money a loan to you. You don't have to repay it. Consider me being generous for old time's sake. Somerville stared at the cash, her fingers trembling. Wilson, her voice was soft, as if a breeze could scatter it, but every word was full of pain. You stole those patents from my computer while my mother was critically ill. You transferred assets, engineered a scheme to saddle me with debt. And now you're trying to cut off my mother's last chance at life. Aren't you afraid of facing consequences? Wilson's face changed slightly, embarrassed to be called out in public, but he quickly recovered his indifference. Sneer, Somerville, you need to speak with evidence. It's in black and white. Your signature is on it. You're a defaulter now. Who's going to believe you? If you don't sign this waiver today, your mother will be kicked out of her hospital room tomorrow. Wilson, why are you wasting your breath on her? Ulysses swayed her hips, reaching for his arm. I told you Somerville is just too strong-willed. What's wrong with compromising? She turned to Somerville, her face a mask of feigned innocence. Don't look at me like that. I'm doing this for your own good. Wilson painstakingly pulled this money from the company's funds. Hurry up and take it to pay the bill. Don't make your mother wait. The man was a jerk, and the woman was a total bitch. Somerville didn't look at her. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and when she reopened them, her gaze held a quiet, stark resolve. She slowly raised her hand, reaching for the stack of money for her mother. She was ready to bend her back, something she'd never done before. Just as her fingers were about to touch the banknotes, a hand reached out from the side and fiercely grabbed her wrist. Somerville's entire body jolted. She turned her head, startled. I looked at her, at her gaunt face, at the desperation that hadn't yet faded from her eyes, and a volcano of rage erupted in my chest. I pulled her behind me, turned, and looked at Wilson. This money, I said, my voice low, laced with extreme, suppressed fury. I'll pay for her. Wilson's expression froze. He looked at me, then at Somerville, as if trying to understand where I'd come from. Who the hell are you? I took out my phone and made one call. Transferred $20,000 to Third Hospital. Put it under Somerville's mother's account. Somerville's eyes widened. Frank, I held up a hand. Don't. Her lips trembled. You don't understand. I can't accept this. I know. I looked at the payment slip still clenched in her hand. That's why I'm not giving you charity. I turned toward Wilson. I'm paying a debt. Wilson scoffed. You don't even know what you're talking about. I know everything. I tossed a folder onto the bench between us. Patent registrations, bank transfers, shell company records, the forged project documents, and most importantly, the recording of Wilson admitting he'd moved Somerville's money into Ulysses' company. Wilson's face drained of color. Ulysses grabbed the folder. Her hand started shaking. This is fake. No. I smiled. My legal team spent 12 hours verifying every page. Wilson suddenly lunged for the folder. Casey caught him by the collar. Touch it, and I'll add assault to the list. Wilson struggled. You can't interfere with our company. Your company? I laughed. You mean the company you stole? I opened another document. 3 hours ago, I purchased every legitimate outstanding claim against your company. Wilson stopped moving. What? I now control the creditors. His face became completely blank. I stepped closer. That means you have two choices. Cooperate with the investigation and return what you stole, or spend the next several years explaining your little shell company arrangement to a judge. Ulysses stared at me. You can't do this. I already did. Somerville stood behind me, completely stunned. Wilson suddenly looked toward her. Somerville, don't listen to him. We were engaged. You know I loved you. She finally laughed. It was a tiny broken sound. You loved me. She looked at the woman beside him. Then why did you give my patents to her? Wilson opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Somerville wiped her eyes. I spent 3 years thinking I was stupid for trusting you. She looked at me. Apparently I wasn't. I shook my head. You were kind, and you made the mistake of thinking everyone else was. Her mother was admitted to dialysis that evening. The hospital called the payment confirmed. Somerville sat beside her mother's bed, holding her hand. I stood outside the room. After a while, she walked out. Why? I knew exactly what she meant. Because you saved my life. She frowned. I gave you money. You gave me more than that. I pulled the old bank card from my pocket. The same card she'd handed me 10 years ago. I kept it. Her eyes immediately reddened. You kept that. Every day. She stared at it for a long time. Then she whispered, I thought you'd forgotten. I smiled. I forgot plenty of things. I placed the card in her palm. But never you. She broke down crying. For years, Somerville had been carrying everyone else's burdens. Her company, her mother's medical bills, Wilson's betrayal, and somehow, even my future. This time, I took the weight from her hands. 3 months later, Wilson and Ulysses were formally charged with fraud, embezzlement, and intellectual property theft. The court froze their remaining assets. Somerville's debt was overturned after the fraudulent guarantee was exposed. The company she had built was returned to her. I offered to buy half. She refused, so I invested instead. On one condition. She became CEO. On her first day back, she walked into the office wearing a simple black suit. Employees stood and applauded. She looked nervous. Then she looked at me. I'm out, don't bow your head. She smiled, and walked through the doors with her head held high. That evening, she found me waiting outside. You know, she said, you still owe me. I raised an eyebrow. For what? She held up the old bank card. 10 years of interest. I laughed. How much? She thought about it. 1 dinner. That's all. She smiled. And maybe the rest of your life. I stared at her. Then I held out my hand. Deal.